Welcome to Week in Review. Do you have young people in your life? We have 4 children and 7 grandchildren. And if you have young people in your life, you know how exciting it can be when, just like my wife and I got off the phone minutes ago, because one of our grandchildren is turning today 13. There's a whole future ahead. But we also know Satan comes to steal, kill, and destroy. And there are dark forces working today. And one of the ways they're working is to try and bring about legalization of marijuana to destroy young people and people across this land. Stay with me. Are you aware of what the progressives are doing to try and legalize marijuana? The Biden administration, and he's under the control of progressives, and what they're endeavoring to do is put before the Health and Human Services Department recommendation now so that we can do what? Well, in terms of marijuana, let's bring it down from a 1-level schedule and bring it down to a 3. And then let's have the Drug Enforcement Agency make a recommendation so that we can see restrictions lifted, tax breaks be given, and then a message, yes, will be communicated that smoking marijuana, it's harmless, there's nothing dangerous about it. But that's a lie. And you know, God has specific things that He teaches us about our minds and being sober-minded, and we have a responsibility to be alert. I want to give you 7 reasons why we do not want to legalize marijuana. But before I go there, let me tell you this. In growing up, my best buddy was dead by the age of, I believe it was 27. He started to get involved with some drugs. And then I remember not too long ago watching the movie on Amy Winehouse. Where did she start as she goes down the tubes with drugs? Started with marijuana. How about the famous Voice? Whitney Houston, if you saw the movie on her, where did it start with her? Well, have a little weed, smoke some dope. And you can see others. My heart broke just the past number of weeks. One of my favorite actors, I don't agree with his leftist policies and his liberal approach to life, but Robert De Niro from The Godfather, I mean, really, he was stunned because what happened? His 19-year-old grandson went down the tubes, died tragically. What was it? Drug overdose. Now, what does God say about these things? Well, let me tell you this. In Revelation 21, it tells those that are cast into the lake of fire. And in that group, there's cowards, number 1, but it talks about those that give themselves to sorcery. Now, you hear that and you say, well, what is that? Well, the actual Greek word there, pharmakia, you hear that word, pharmakia, that's where we say pharmacy or pharmaceuticals. So there can be a positive approach, obviously, when you need some medication and some pharmaceuticals. But the other side of it is when we get into narcotics and drugs, and that includes marijuana. People can alter their minds. That's what pharmakia speaks about. You come under the control of spiritual forces. You yield your mind and you're no longer sober. If you saw the movie Jesus Revolution, you remember they featured Dr. Timothy Leary, and he was the high priest of drugs. And his famous line was, hey, tune in, tune out, and drop out. And what was he doing? He was saying, smoke dope. Take drugs, LSD, and that's how you connect with God and this new supernatural realm. That's deception. It's counterfeit. And so it says in Revelation 21, those that engage in pharmaceutical sorcery, yielding their mind, you know what happens to them? They're cast into the lake of fire. You look at it. It also says in a previous chapter, I'll put it on the screen for you, it talks about the fact that there's merchants that are under judgment in the end times, and they are those that give themselves to what? Seduction of sorcery, pharmaceutical drugs. I'm going to put on the screen something that God said to His people when they were about to enter the land. I want you to follow this with me. Read these words. It's sobering. God said something was an abomination and detestable. Read this. God said clearly, He said, when you enter into the land which the Lord your God gives you, you must not learn to practice the abominations of those nations. There must not be found among you anyone who makes his son or his daughter pass through the fire. That speaks of the killing of unborn and babies and children, and or who uses divination, or who uses witchcraft, or an interpreter of omens, or here it is, here we go, pharmakia, or a sorcerer, or one who casts spells, or who, what else? Well, spiritualist or an occultist or a necromancer dealing with the spirits, dead people. For all that do these things are an abomination to the Lord. And because of these abominations, the Lord your God will drive them out from before you. Those are sober words. And God is speaking to us today because there are progressive policies being put in place. I don't believe Mr. Biden even understands what's going on, but they just say sign off on these things. Do you know that after the Korean War, they found a document that gave the literal socialist and communist manifesto on how to see America collapse? And maybe you've seen in the book, this book here, The Naked Communist. Reagan recommended it. About 1.5 million went out very rapidly. Dr. Ben Carson said this book, the Communist Manifesto, in this book, The Naked Communist, tells you the progressive playbook, how they want to bring about the collapse and destruction of America. And they have ideas. And so let's get narcotics. Let's get them legalized. Let's convey the idea they're harmless. Do you know that with the open border, what's happened? Do you know that 91,000 migrant families, this was unprecedented, a new record, just weeks ago, in 1 month, came across the border? 91,000! Now we've seen 7 million under Biden already. This is horrible what's taking place right now. And what are we finding out? Fentanyl is coming right with them. Last year, over 100,000 deaths from drugs. And so right now you have progressives saying, keep the borders open, let's legalize drugs. What are we supposed to do? Well, I want you to know this, that when Mao Zedong, as a communist, he came into dictatorship in China, one of the first things he did was he ended what were called opium dens. You ever hear the term pipe dream? Someone said, oh, well, that's a pipe dream. Where that came from was from opium dens, where people went in, they began to smoke opium, and then they went into an altered state. They yielded their minds, and it was destroying China. So Mao Zedong moved in and ended it. Today, we have legislators, progressives, that are pushing this. I don't trust Joe Biden. I don't trust what he's trying to do. And you have to be alert of this, not only so that you pray, but that you can tell your own representatives to not approve what's going to be pushed, because they want to bring this about in these coming weeks. Watch this bullseye video, 7 reasons not to legalize marijuana. This book, I'm Okay, You're Okay, was a bestseller. I was told the author of the book took his life, and I communicated that. Because of it, I was sued for $22 million. I believed a lie, and I suffered because of it. Years ago, there was a song, Hotel California. Do you remember the cryptic line? You can check out anytime you please, but you can never leave. There are many people that are becoming addicted to drugs and heavy drugs because of marijuana. Proverbs 22:3 says, the prudent man sees danger, but hides himself. The fool goes on and will suffer for it. George Washington, our first president, said, an uninformed populace is easily enslaved. Let's look at these reasons. Number 1, don't be misinformed. People say, well, this won't affect young people. It's only for ages 21 and up and private use. And, since you can grow it at home, it won't go out. It'll be sold, not on the streets. Hey, Colorado relaxed their laws on marijuana, and drug dealers are selling it on the streets. And even little children have ended up in the hospital from the cookies with marijuana. People say, well, it's for medical reasons. Cancer patients. Folks, scores want it legalized to get stoned, avoid jail, party, and make some fast cash. You look at Los Angeles, they've already closed 200 marijuana clinics. Holland, Portugal, Zurich, they have revamped their laws too. They see the dangers. Now, the number 2 reason we shouldn't legalize marijuana is because your health matters. Do you know that secondhand marijuana smoke is just as dangerous as tobacco? That's from a University of California, San Francisco study. Smoking cigarettes kills 400,000 Americans every year. 50,000 die from secondhand smoke. Cigarette smoking cuts lives short by an average of 13 years. Now, Joseph Califano, the head of the National Center on Addiction and Substance Abuse, says that marijuana is definitely a dangerous drug that is addictive and adversely affects the motor skills of users, as well as produces serious damage to a person's brain over the long term. Think of THC, the primary component. Today, it's 8 times more potent than just 2 decades ago. An addiction psychiatrist wrote in the New York Times, a liberal paper, quote, "I've spent 25 years as a doctor treating drug abusers. They're excellent con artists. Marijuana activists use phony science. For years, they claimed pot was good for glaucoma and never apologized when the research found it could actually make glaucoma worse. They still insist weed isn't addictive, despite every addiction medicine society saying it is. They've even produced their own flawed scientific studies supposedly proving medical marijuana laws don't increase use among teens, when almost all the evidence says just the opposite. It sends the message that weed is harmless. Even the research shows that teens who use it regularly do worse in school, are twice as likely to drop out, and earn less as adults. Teenage use has been shown to permanently lower IQ. That's Dr. Edward Gogek, a Democrat and addiction psychiatrist, writing in the New York Times. If celebrities like Whitney Houston, Amy Winehouse, Michael Jackson, and others who died of drugs could give us a warning on this topic, what do you think it would be? You remember the movie Wizard of Oz? Do you remember at the end the deceiving mastermind that was fooling the masses? He was exposed. Today, we've got to do likewise as we hear individuals advocating for marijuana legalization. The third reason we should not go down this path is we need to avoid deception. 2013 said this: 1 in 15 high school seniors reported using marijuana daily. 10 years ago, it was 1 in 50. Many are being deceived. It's an easy means of escape to problems, depression, school challenges, parental problems. But once the buzz wears off, what happens? You got to grab another joint, and that can also lead to harder drugs. You get addicted. The fourth reason we need to stay clear is because we're called to maintain maximum mental capacity. In the Bible, in 1 Peter 4:7, it says, "Be alert and of sober mind." Marijuana usage will bring about the opposite effect. It'll affect motor skills, damages the brain. In fact, Northwestern University had a study, and they said that healthy individuals who did not use marijuana scored 37 times better on average than users, not just addicts, who had smoked pot. On TV, there's a co-host, Joe Scarborough. He said, "I never smoked pot." And he said, "Why do I want to make my odds for success even longer? It just makes you dumb." The fifth reason is protect public safety. Folks, come on, traffic accidents, are tremendous. And yet we're going to compound it with pot? 33,000 Americans are killed, and 1/3 because of drunk drivers. And think those that are paralyzed or impaired for life. 1.2 million drivers are arrested annually for drunk driving. And the highest number is what? 21 to 25-year-olds. It's the leading cause of death for teens. We can't compound it with this. Number 6, we don't want to relinquish control of our life. A man who works with hundreds of young people delivered from addiction said this, quote, "Our experience is that marijuana is a gateway drug." He says half of the young people admit they went on to harder drugs, but where did they start? With marijuana. Number 7, we need to be responsible and care for our children and our grandchildren. Let me give you a quote. 1 in 6 youth who try marijuana before the age of 18 will either abuse it or become addicted. That's from the National Institutes of Health. I want to end by saying there's a tremendous documentary I saw called Narco Cultura. It deals with Juarez, Mexico, where in the movie they talk of 3,500 homicides in a year. And yet, a few miles over the border is El Paso, 5 homicides. What's the difference? Well, one has become a drug-infested cesspool. A passionate woman in the end of this documentary cries out, says that marijuana is bad and drugs are bad and Mexico is being destroyed unless we change. She gives us that warning. May we heed it in the United States. Hey friends, if you felt this video was helpful, make sure you like and subscribe so you get notified once new videos become available. Thanks.